Hi everybody, happy Saturday. Welcome to my channel, Jesus and Coffee Conversations. I am back. Last week I could not do a video because I was sick, but I am feeling so much better. So I am going to talk to you guys about disobedience today. And I did a video a couple of months ago about obedience, and I will have that pop up so you guys can click it and go watch that after this one. But yeah, so I'll give a little refresher about what obedience is, and then I'll go into disobedience. So obedience is when you're doing what you're told or asked to do, and you are accepting authority and the will of God. And then disobedience is basically the opposite of that. You're rebelling against God and you're putting your will before His. And I have some scriptures here. I will put all of them in the description box below. I'm only going to read a couple of them. So the first one I'm going to read is coming from Luke chapter 6, verse 46. And this is from the Living Translation. And it reads, "Why do you call me Lord when you won't obey me?" And this is Jesus talking to the disciples. And then James chapter 1 verse 22 reads, "And remember, it is a message to obey, not just listen to. So don't fool yourselves." So here we can see that it is important that you obey God. It's not enough to just listen to what He's telling you to do. You have to act on it and you have to do what He's telling you to do or asking you to do. And, being disobedient to anyone, but especially to God, has its consequences. And, when you think about like a child, if you're a parent, or even if you're not a parent, you might be an aunt or grandma or whatever, if you're in the kitchen cooking and, your child is in there and, they're just around the stove is hot, and maybe they're trying to like reach up and touch the top of the oven, or maybe they're just getting too close to the oven and the entire, stove and oven is hot. And you keep telling them, stay over here away from the stove, because if you touch it, you're going to burn yourself. But as we all know, you tell a child something and that not to do something, and that just makes them want to do it even more. So what happens is when you're not looking, your child reaches their hand out to either touch the top of the stove, or they get too close to the stove and they burn like their arm or something on it. And then they're screaming out in pain and they're crying because they just did what you told them not to do. And so the result is they're being burned, hopefully not seriously, but as a parent, you're like, I told you not to touch the stove or to stay away from the stove because it's hot and you're going to burn yourself. And that's what happened. You burn yourself. And the child, I'm sure, learned, his or her lesson. They now know, okay, when mama says or daddy says don't touch the stove, I know not to do that again, because the last time I did it, I hurt myself. So unfortunately, a lot of people have to learn the hard way by, being disobedient. They go and do it anyway, and then they have to suffer the consequences of it. So the people that we're going to look at in the Bible, because I have a couple of people in the Bible that were disobedient to God, and they suffered consequences because of their disobedience. So the first group of people we're going to look at, I talked about them before. These are the Israelites. So the Israelites were, were God's chosen people that were slaves in Egypt, and He sent Moses to deliver them. And, He had this land that He promised them. It was only a few days' journey. But of course, it took them walking around in the desert for 40 years because they were murmuring, complaining, rebelling, and being disobedient to God. So in Numbers chapter 14, verses 21 through 23, and I'm going to read it. Let me turn there. And this was after, like, God was just completely fed up with them. Like, He's, showed them that He's going to take care of them and provide for them and, all of that. And they still were murmuring, complaining, and just, and He just got fed up with them. So Numbers 14, 21 through 23. Then the Lord said, "All right, I will pardon them as you have requested, but I vow by my own name that just as it is true that all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, so it is true that not one of the men who has seen my glory and the miracles I did both in Egypt and in the wilderness and 10 times refuse to trust me and obey me shall even see the land I promised to this people's ancestors. But my servant Caleb is a different kind of man. He has obeyed me fully. I will bring him into the land he entered, and I'm going into verse 24 here. I will bring him into the land he entered as a spy, and his descendants shall have their full share in it. So I just read Numbers 14, verses 21 through 24. So there, you see God saying that, the people that saw, the miracles and the things that I did when I brought them out of Egypt, they're not going to see the promised land. I promised you guys this land, but none of y'all are going to see it except for Caleb and even Joshua. Those were the only two that actually left Egypt with all the other Israelites that survived and were able to walk into the promised land with their descendants, because they were the only two that were obedient to God and did not rebel against him and were not complaining and murmuring. So that is the consequences that the children of Israel had to suffer because they were disobedient to God and were rebellious and not trusting him. God refused to let them enter into his promise. And then somebody else that was disobedient, and I'm not going to read it here, but it's Moses. When the children of Israel were saying that they were thirsty, God told Moses to speak to a rock and that water would flow from there. But because, Moses was fed up too with the complaining and the murmuring, he got so angry that he took his rod and he hit the rock not once but twice out of his anger, and the water still flowed, but he didn't do it the way that God told him to do it. And so therefore Moses, the consequence of his action was that he too could not enter into the promised land. The other people that were disobedient, and this is like the very beginning, Adam and Eve. God specifically told Adam not to eat from a certain tree, the tree of life, of knowledge of good and evil. And what happens is that Adam, I don't know if he told Eve this or not, but she went to the tree first, and the devil was talking to her and convinced her to take it, and she ate it. And then it says clearly that she gave it to her husband who was there with her. So obviously Adam had to be standing right there beside her, listening to what the enemy was saying as well, and he decided to bite into the forbidden fruit as well. And the consequence of their action is that power and authority and all of that was taken from them and given over to the devil. And they were kicked out of paradise. They were walking with God, talking with God, had this perfect life and perfect relationship with him. But all of that got messed up because of their disobedience. And Lot's wife, when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, God's instructions were to, the angels told them, we're going to take you guys out of the city, but you have to keep looking forward. You cannot look behind you. And what happens is they were, fleeing the city. They got out of the city, and Lot's wife turned around because she loved that place of sin so much. She turned around and immediately became a pillar of salt. So that was her consequence, was basically she lost her life. Samson is someone else. I'm not gonna say that he necessarily wasn't the one that was disobedient, but he told Delilah, which was basically like a spy for the Philistines, where he gets his strength from, which was from his hair. And he told her that, if my hair gets cut, then my strength is going to be completely taken away from me. And so he was not supposed to tell anybody that, and he was not supposed to cut his hair. But he told, she was his wife. He thought he could trust her. He wasn't supposed to marry her anyway because she was an enemy of God's people. But he told her, and what ended up happening is she set him up. When he went to sleep, she cut all his hair off, called the Philistine men to come in there and get him. They were able to overpower him because his strength was gone. So they, poked his eyes out and all of that stuff. Somebody else, we have King Saul, and I am going to... probably won't read that one, but it's in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 22 through 23. And actually, I think I will read that. So 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 22 through 23. Okay. And I'll give you a little bit of background. This is where God told Saul to take out this enemy camp territory, and they were complete. It was Amalek. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, but it was that nation. Not Sam. What's the man's name? Saul. Sorry, was supposed to completely wipe out that nation, everything, and so Saul goes, him and his army, they, destroy the people and things, but there were some things, I'm trying to see what he didn't destroy. I believe he didn't. Okay, so he didn't destroy everything. He only destroyed the stuff that he thought was worthless, but the things that he saw valuable, he kept. And that was not what God commanded. God said that you are to completely destroy everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't care what it is, every single thing. And because Saul did not destroy everything and he kept the stuff that he thought was valuable and worth something, his kingdom was stripped from him. And so that's what I'm going to pick up with verse 22. And it says, Samuel replied, has the Lord as much pleasure in your burnt offerings and sacrifices as in your obedience? Obedience is far better than sacrifice. He is much more interested in your listening to him than in your offering the fat of rams to him. For rebellion is as bad as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as bad as worshiping idols. And now because you have rejected the word of Jehovah, he has rejected you from being king. So here, Samuel is basically saying it does not matter that you are offering what you took to God. You were not obedient to him. And obedience is better than your sacrifice. And because Saul was disobedient, he was stripped from being king. And what happens is we know that God anoints David to be king and take Saul's place. And so that is, another reason that obedience is important. You have to be obedient to God, because if not, it has its consequences. It could cause you to lose everything, even your life. And King Solomon, the wisest man in the Bible, was also disobedient to God. And that, I thought I wrote it down. I did. It's in 1 Kings chapter 11. I'm only going to read a little bit because it's kind of like a long chapter. But it's 1 Kings chapter 11. And I'll go into this. So actually I'm not going to read it. But if you go and read it on your own in 1 Kings chapter 11. I'm just going to summarize it a little bit. So God commanded that his people not marry foreigners. Not because of race, as some people say, that he's against interracial marriage and all that stuff. It was because the people of the other nations were idol worshipers. They were not worshiping the true God. And so God did not want his children to marry them because it would turn them away from him. And he is the only true and living God. And so Solomon, as wise as he was dumb in this area because he disobeyed God and he married all of those wives, and all of them were foreigners and idol worshipers. They did not worship God. They didn't believe in God. And what ended up happening is, as he got older, his wives were able to turn him away from serving God, and he started building temples and all these things for the fake gods and all these idols and things, and he started to serve and worship them instead of Jehovah God. And so what happened, his consequence of that was that his kingdom was taken. And, but God, because of David, King David was obedient to God. And because of King David, who is Solomon's father, because David was obedient, God honored David by letting Solomon continue as king. And he let one of his sons rule over one tribe because David was obedient. So even if, and that's, kind of like a generational thing, like maybe you are somebody who is obedient to God, and because you're obedient to God, then God will honor your obedience through your descendants. But they still will have consequences if they are disobedient to him. Kind of like with David and Solomon. So David was a man after God's own heart. He was quick to repent anytime he, committed a sin. And he was completely obedient to God. Anything God told him to do, he did it, and did it exactly the way that God said. And because of that, God honored Solomon and one of Solomon's sons to continue as king and to rule one tribe. So that, it goes to show you that if you are obedient to God, then God will look after you and your children and your children's children and all of that through the generations. But if you're not obedient to God, then it's going to go down. It's not only affecting you. And that's something that we have to remember, is that everything we do, it doesn't just affect us, it affects our entire descendant line, our entire descendants. So you can still be paying for the sins of your mom, your dad, your grandpa, your great-grandpa, great-great-great-great, like all the way back to like the Bible days, because of their disobedience or because of their obedience. So I have some questions for you to find out if you are being disobedient to God. So the first one is, are you doing what he forbids? If you read the Bible, you know clearly what God is against and what God is for. Are you doing anything that he forbids? So whether that's premarital sex, whether that is you not honoring your mother and father, whether that's you, being idol worshiper or anything like that. If you're doing anything that God forbids, you're being disobedient. Are you doing what he commands, all of it, not just a little bit, or are you not doing it? So one thing that comes to mind for me is tithes and offering. Are you being obedient to God by paying your tithes and offering? And I know you might be saying, I live paycheck to paycheck. I got all these bills. God doesn't need my money and all of that. All of that is true. But God commands that you give the first fruit of your increase. It's his anyway. He's the one that blesses you to get the paycheck that you're getting. And you might be living paycheck to paycheck. I know what that feels like. I've been there. And I still paid my tithes and my offering, and God made my check stretch. And pretty soon I didn't have to be living paycheck to paycheck. And you also have to be a good steward over your money. A lot of it has to do with budgeting. Like, if the money that you spend, and I know ladies, we got to get our hair done and nails done, but take that money and save it and say, you know what, for 2 months, I'm going to go without getting my hair done or my nails done or whatever. But anyway, pay your tithes and offering. That's the main point. Is to pay your tithes and offering, be obedient in that, and God will let your finances stretch. Every seed produces after its kind. So if you sow financially, then finances are going to come back to you. So in God's kingdom, it's the opposite. You have to give in order to receive. So if you give your tithes and offering, God is going to honor that, and he's going to stand by his word. He's going to rebuke the devourer for your sake, and he's going to open up the windows of heaven for you and pour you out blessing. Pretty soon, money is going to start coming in. People might start treating you to lunch or dinner or offering to buy your groceries or whatever it is, but you have to give God his cut first. If you're not doing that, then you are being disobedient. And the consequence of that is living paycheck to paycheck and living in lack. The next question, are you adding or taking away from what he says? In the Bible, it says, do not add to my words. Do not take away from my words. So when you are reading scripture, are you taking it and are you adding things to it? Or are you taking things away from it? And that is being disobedient, because God says what he says and he means what he says. There's no reason for us to add to it, and there's no reason for us to take away from it. Yes, we can interpret it and break it down for people to understand. But when we do that, we're still supposed to be saying exactly what God is saying, only in an easier way for people to digest the information. But we're not adding anything to it, and we're not taking anything away from it. Do you do what he says, but put your own twist on it? So kind of like King Saul, when God said completely destroy everything, are you destroying everything but saying, okay, I see some value in this, I'm not going to destroy that, I'm going to take that and keep it for myself or give it to this person or whatever? Or maybe he says, okay, I want you to drive around the corner. Do you say, okay, I'm going to go around the corner, but it's just around the corner. I'm going to save my gas and I'm going to walk around the corner. So anything like that, it's like, yes, God, I'm being obedient. I'm doing what you say. You say go around the corner, but he said get in your car and drive, and you're saying, no, I'm going to go around the corner, but I'm going to walk. That is being disobedient. When God tells you to do something, you have to do what he says the way he says to do it. So those are the questions that I have to get you thinking about, okay, am I being obedient or am I being disobedient? And if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 26 to 28, there is a clear-cut example of all the blessings and the cursings that happens when you do what God says to do. So I don't know about you, but I want to be on the good end of being obedient to God. And it's not always easy. A lot of times God, says to do things that will make you look foolish. It'll have people talking about you. It'll have people making fun of you. It'll have you, sometimes maybe scared to do it because you don't know how people are going to react. But you have to be obedient. And God, he's forgiving and he's merciful. But you cannot just keep walking in a lifestyle of disobedience. You're going to have to answer for yourself eventually one day, and that day is coming very soon. So you want to make sure that you are being obedient to God, doing what he says to do exactly the way he says it, so that you can receive, the blessings and things of it, and so you can be in right standing with him. So I hope that you guys got something out of this video. I know it's kind of long today, but thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you if you're watching this and you follow me on Instagram, like you're a new follower to my Instagram page. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so excited to announce that I am at over 300 followers on Instagram. It is growing. My Facebook, if you're watching this, thank you for following there as well. That is starting to grow a lot also. And if you're not following me, I will put all of that in the description box below for you, so you can go and follow me. I'll also have all the scriptures that I read and the ones that I didn't read as well. Enjoy your Saturday. Make sure to come back and see me next time, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.